Hello, my name is Benji, and this is part 2 of creative ways to display houseplants. So I'm going to give you guys some updates on how the plants from the first video are doing. So this thing is super cool. This is one of the kokedamas that I made in the previous video. So what I did was I tied it to the suction cup and then I attached it to the top of this glass dome, and yeah, it looks pretty cool. It's like it's floating in midair. I think I've watered it like once in this past month. Very simple, very easy, and it looks pretty cool. So this is the anthurium pendens that I mounted on this Vanda pot. It's doing well. I water it maybe once a week. Either I dunk it in a bucket of water or I just take it onto my balcony and spray it with the hose until the moss is completely saturated. This is the first new leaf since I mounted it, but yeah, it's doing really well. Okay, so now moving on to the new ways that I've been displaying my plants. The first thing is that I've started to move away from moss poles completely. The reason being is that my climate is kind of just too dry to use them efficiently, so there isn't really much of a practical benefit to using moss poles for me, since the moss poles will just dry out super fast and the aerial roots also just dry out and don't really attach onto the moss pole. And the main reason why people use moss poles is so the roots of the plant can attach onto the moss and grow into it, but that doesn't work if the moss pole is always dry. I think it's more practical to use moss poles if you're in a very humid climate or if you're in a greenhouse, but that's not the case for me. The other reason is that I think it's really annoying to have to extend the moss poles all the time. And then also I think that they're like kind of unattractive. I feel like they kind of distract a lot from the plant. So recently I've been using pieces of wood like this. This is a manzanita branch. I think it looks a lot more natural and interesting compared to a moss pole. This plant is a Dioscorea elephantipes. I don't know how to pronounce it. The next plant I have is this Monstera albo. I got this from my friend. So shout out to Michael. Thank you for this plant. It has a long way to go, but I know that it's gonna look really cool once it grows out. So you can get these natural looking branches from aquarium stores and reptile stores, and it just adds a lot more character, I think, and looks much more natural and plant-like. Okay, so I'm also using these really tall wooden stakes that I get from my local nursery, and I like that they're kind of thinner than moss poles, so they don't really detract from the look of the plant. The good thing about these is that they're pretty cheap. I think this cost me like 75 cents and this one was like $1. You can get them at nurseries that sell outdoor plants, like larger trees. And yeah, I think it looks much nicer than moss poles, and I just use twine to tie them onto the stake, and it looks very natural, and yeah, I really like it. Over here, we also have another wooden stake with a philodendron glorious climbing up. The next pretty cool way to display plants is through mounting. So specifically, this mostly applies to staghorn ferns, Podicerium, but I also do this for some of my anthurium as well. And this is pretty simple. They're just mounted either on cork or on like a wood slab. I get asked a lot about like how to mount the staghorns, and I don't have any staghorns to show you guys right now, but I'm going to mount this anthurium warocqueanum, and it's pretty much the same process. You just wrap the roots in sphagnum moss and then you tie it around the piece of wood, and then that's pretty much it. It's pretty simple, but I do understand that like some people might not know how to do it. So I'll show you guys how to do it with this plant, and it's pretty much the exact same process with a staghorn fern. So this is the piece of wood that I'm using. So this is cork bark. I got this from Josh's Frogs. And yeah, I'm just going to tie the plant onto the bark like this and then have it hang. You're going to take your moist sphagnum moss and wrap it around the roots and kind of put as much as you can on, so that way it doesn't dry out too quickly. Being mounted on this in the open air, the moss does dry out pretty fast. And then use some type of string. I'm using transparent fishing line, and just wrap it really tightly onto the wood. Go in multiple directions, and yeah, just make sure it is really stuck on there. And then once it's secure, just cut off the string and then make a knot, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Now that you have your plant all tied to the cork bark, you're gonna want to be able to mount it. So you need to make some type of like hanging thing right here. So what I'm gonna do is take this and create 2 small holes and then make a little hoop with the metal wire that I'm a super big fan of. I use it all the time. I feel like it's a plant staple for me at this point, which is kind of weird because it's like metal wire, but I've used it so many times. So I'm putting the wire through the holes that I made, and then I'm just twist tying them together to create a little loop to hang the plant from. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm putting this plant in my bathroom where the humidity stays pretty high, just hanging from this little hook above my toilet, and I think it looks really good. So for staghorn ferns, it's pretty much the same but slightly different. Staghorn ferns have nutrient fronds as well as shield fronds. So the nutrient fronds are what come out of the plant, and the shield fronds make a shield around the plant pretty much. And new shield fronds will grow over old ones. So you can use your string around a shield frond, and over time, the shield frond will cover up the string, as you can see here. So the last thing that I have for you guys is top dressing your soil with something. So like sand or gravel. I think it really completes the look of your plant. Like it just makes it look finished and complete. Also, most of the time our soil mixes are kind of ugly, like it's dirt and perlite and wood chips and stuff. And it can kind of look a little bit messy, but adding a top dressing I think really elevates the look of the plant. So this is actually just Thai basil. You can get it pretty much at like any Vietnamese restaurant. I just have this in this very shallow dish with soil at the bottom and then a top dress with sand, and it just looks very beautiful. So yeah, I've been experimenting with a lot of top dressings. I've been taking a lot of inspiration from bonsai recently, just because they are very focused on how the plant is displayed and presented. I'm gonna share some of the different top dressings I've been using. This is my Monstera adansonii, and for the top dressing, I'm using a mix of black lava rock and akadama, but I think it would also just look good with black lava rock. So this is the black lava rock. It's very small. I think that top dressings typically look better when they're a smaller grain size. So I wouldn't recommend using things like big pebbles. And on this plant, it's top dressed with only akadama. I really like this brown tan color of the akadama, especially when it's paired with a black pot. I think it looks very nice. So this substrate is called turfus. It's really cheap. They use it for baseball fields or something, but it makes a pretty nice top dressing, and it comes in multiple different colors. Also, I've been growing a lot of my houseplants outside on my balcony recently. And some of these have moss top dressings, which is super cool. Okay, thank you for watching. I hope you learned something new, and maybe you learned something that you can implement into your houseplants. Just have fun with it. This is how I keep plants entertaining for me, is trying different ways to make them look pretty and incorporate them into the home. Thank you for watching, and have a great day. Bye.